Welcome to the Paradigm Shift on 4ZZZ 102.1, where we challenge the assumptions of our current society to resist oppression and investigate alternative ways of living, for a world based on justice, solidarity and sustainability. Welcome to the Paradigm Shift on 4ZZZ 102.1 FM. It's your local community radio station. My name is Andy and I will be hanging out with you for the next hour, broadcasting on the lands of the Jagera and Turrbal people, of course. And today on the show, we are going to be talking about sport. It seems an appropriate time to be doing a Paradigm Shift episode on sport. There's a lot of sport happening at the moment. There's the Women's Soccer World Cup. There's the Men's Cricket Ashes. There's the general footy seasons are coming towards the final series, the conclusion. And if you've been listening to 4ZZZ in recent weeks, you're probably aware that on Sunday, the Reclink Community Cup is happening when Brisbane's community media team, the Brisbane Lions, including a number of 4ZZZ announcers and myself, take on the Rocking Horses, which is a collection of Brisbane's finest musicians / footballers. It's all happening at the Everton Wolves field at Enoggera this Sunday, 12 to 5 p.m. The whole day goes for. I don't think the game will go for all of that time, at least I'm hoping not. I don't think our training has included that much fitness work. But it will be a very fun day and raising money for a worthy cause, as you will hear, because as part of today's show, I will be speaking to Dave Wells, the CEO of Reclink, to hear about how that organisation uses sport to try to include people who are marginalised in our society and try to build up confidence and connectedness and teamwork skills and things like that. It has also, over the years, managed the not that simple task of combining the music and sport worlds for the Reclink Community Cup, which happens around the country each year. I'm also going to speak to one of the Reclink players who'll be on our opposing side, the Rocking Horses, on Sunday, Craig Quartermaine, comedian and Aboriginal man, about what footy means to Aboriginal people in this country. It is, of course, one of the spheres of our society where Aboriginal people are most prominent. And not just at the elite level does footy mean a lot to Aboriginal people, as we will hear. After that, I will be speaking to Abbey Boyer, who is an academic from the University of Melbourne, about the Women's Soccer World Cup and what that event and women's sport in general means for gender equality and for young girls, things like that. And then finally, I'll be chatting to Andy George, who... There's lots of people that play sport in this country, but not many people can say that they were sent to jail for running onto a sporting field. And Andy can. He disrupted an NRL game last year to share the message that maybe we should be doing more about climate change, and was sent to prison for his efforts. I talked to him about being part of a long tradition of trying to disrupt sport to get political messages across, and also maybe try to question the priorities of our Australian society, which loves sport. Nobody could argue with that, but sometimes maybe loves sport a bit too much at the expense of other things that we could be putting our energy and affections into. So that is what's coming up. And I have timed it because we've got the Reclink Cup coming up and there's a lot of 4ZZZ people involved, and it's a good thing for connecting this radio station with the community in other ways. But I'm very happy to talk about sport. I personally quite like sport. I enjoy playing it and I enjoy watching it as well. And it's such a big part of our culture that actually sport brings out a lot of things that are interesting to talk about. And like everything else, it's political. You know, sport doesn't just happen. There are social factors that influence, you know, the way that we play sport, the way that we follow sport. And so well worth interrogating on the paradigm shift, I would say. So let's get into it. I will start off with my chat with Reclink CEO Dave Wells.
G'day Andy and listeners, I'm Dave Wells from Reclink Australia. I'm the CEO here and I've been here for a couple of years now and thoroughly love the place.
So many of our listeners might not be very familiar with Reclink and what you do, so could you give us a bit of an introduction of Reclink?
Yeah, it's a fantastic organisation. We're a national sports organisation. We deliver sport and recreation programs across the country to clients in the community services sector. But we're not really about the sport, we're primarily about health and well-being. We always work towards better physical health, better mental health and greater social inclusion through delivery of sport and rec programs.
So what's some examples of these sport and rec programs that you run?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's pretty wide. We deliver 75 odd different types of programs. So from a fully fledged football league here in Victoria, which is made up of participants from the drug and alcohol rehab sector, from disability sector and from the homelessness sector. At the other end of the scale is kind of one-off programs that might be walking groups. We might do walking photography exhibitions. We do a range of online programs, wheelchair yoga, things you can do in your lounge to keep you physically active. And we do obviously all the mainstream sports, basketball, volleyball, netball, softball, baseball, you name it, we deliver it. Cricket, that's pretty big as well.
And what in particular about sport and other outdoor recreation activities do you think is useful for connecting people who are marginalised or helping people who are struggling with addiction and mental health and things like that?
Oh, we know that physical activity keeps you healthy. I mean, you and I know that from our own lives and from our kids' lives and people around us. And it's even more so when you're facing a range of challenges in your life. But that's not the only thing it does. It keeps you mentally fit as well, mentally strong, and it builds a team around you. It builds a group of people and a community around you that you're connected with that are undergoing a similar journey and also helping out. And I think that's one of the key things. It builds that protective factor around you of other voices saying, you know, is this the right thing to do? And then at its most simple and at its most basic, many of our participants are looking for jobs, and you think about what participating in a sport does for that. Helps you to turn up on time, bring the right gear, the right equipment, make a plan, execute a plan as a team. So all of these life skills are taught and practiced through participation in sport and recreation.
How many people have been through Reclink's programs over the years, and I guess what kind of results have you seen?
Yeah, this is the incredible part of the model actually. So in the last 12 months alone, it's the end of financial year and we're doing all the reporting and stuff. We had 176,000 participants through our programs, which is a pretty phenomenal number for what is a relatively small organisation. And the success stories are just endless. The people's lives that have been turned around, people who credit Reclink or participation in Reclink programs with saving their lives from depression, from all sorts of really difficult mental health situations are significant. We wrote a book about it actually called The Power of a Football, and that's really just about one of our flagship historical programs, which is the Football League, which has been running over 30 years. And in that book there's 30 odd stories of both participants but also volunteers, coaches and umpires and others whose lives have been changed by participating in Reclink, and the rehabilitation and the connection with community just comes through so strongly.
It's interesting when it comes to sport, and I guess football in particular, there's lots of benefits that we could name from it, like physical exercise, teamwork, and the satisfaction of seeing your skills improve and things like that. But there's also lots of unpleasant things that are a part of sport often as well, like competitiveness and the tribalism of us versus them. And a lot of people, sport carries a lot of baggage from high school or childhood when they weren't very good at it. Are these tensions something that you see in trying to do what Reclink does?
Yeah, that's a great observation, Andy. We deliver sport in a really different way. For us, sure, there's still a winning and losing element, but that's not the main thing. Participation's the main thing. And to your point, we deliver sport in schools for kids who won't play in other sport, in other opportunities. And we go into schools and we deliver it in a way that says you actually don't have to be the best. You don't have to have a whole developed set of skills to participate in this. And we do that in primary schools and high schools. And our staff are really focused on inclusion and participation rather than on winning and losing. But you're right, sport can bring out the worst in some people, and we certainly, we work our way through that from time to time, and you get some difficult situations where you do have to work through that type of thing, because that's not what Reclink's about. We're really about participation and everyone having a good time and coming together.
So aside from the usual Reclink competitions, there's also the Community Cup, which is taking place this Sunday in Brisbane with many 4ZZZ personnel out on the field. Can you tell us a bit about Reclink Community Cup?
Yeah, I'm excited about the Community Cup. I'll be up there this weekend. The Community Cup's been running in Melbourne for 30 years, and we now replicate it around the country. It's really an opportunity for the music and art sector and the radio sector to come together and support Reclink in a fundraiser. It's a great game between your rock stars and your radio DJs, essentially. It's a game of football. Sometimes there's some amazing skills on the field, to tell you the truth, Andy. Other times it's just a lot of fun and a lot of hijinks, and people can come along and watch and be a part of the day and be a part of fundraising for Reclink and be a part of the music that happens afterwards. There's always music afterwards. Bands are playing. A little concert breaks out, which is fantastic, and we really just have a fun time.
So it seems to me that Melbourne is where Reclink has the biggest presence, but Reclink is active in Queensland and Brisbane. How can people find out more if they're interested in connecting with it or volunteering?
Yeah, we do have it in Brisbane. You can just jump on our website. You can find the details about Reclink and hit the contact us and let us know if you want to get involved, that's for sure. Up in Queensland, we run an incredible employment program. It's a little bit different. We do use sport and rec within that program to help people learn to work in a team and build all those skills that we've talked about before. But that employment program gets over 80% of our participants get employed within 6 months of being in that program. So it's got some fantastic outcomes. So we do that, and then we also deliver sport and rec programs. We have a couple of sport and rec coordinators up there in and around Brisbane. And
you mentioned Reclink's new footy book. How can people find that?
Yeah, so the book's called The Power of a Football, How Football Saves Lives. It's put together by Peter Cullen, who's the founder of Reclink Australia, and it's promoted on all our socials and on our website. So if you want to buy it, you can just click there or go to the local bookshop. It's in the bookshop as well. And it really is a story of how sport can actually change someone's life. So I'd encourage you to get that and have a read if you're interested in at all in how community sport impacts the world in which we live, because it gives a much bigger picture as well.
All right, thanks very much for chatting, Dave, and we'll see you on Sunday at the game.
Thanks, Andy. Talk soon. Bye.
We were speaking with Dave Wells, CEO of Reclink Australia, which is an organisation that runs sport programs to try to include people on the margins in our society and try to assist personal development. And now we are going to be talking about Aboriginal people and footy. I spoke with Craig Quartermaine, who is going to be running on the field for the Rocking Horses at the Reclink Cup, which is happening this Sunday at Everton Wolves field at Enoggera. And Craig won't just be repping the red, black, and yellow of the rocking horses, but he is also a proud Aboriginal man. So I thought it'd be good to chat to him to hear about what footy means for Aboriginal people in this country.
Wanji, my name's Craig Quartermaine. I am a comedian based out of Brisbane.
And you're also a footy player, footy fan. What is it that you like about footy?
Look, I'm West Australian. It's what we know. It's our game. I'm also an Indigenous Australian, and up in Kununurra, that's what you do. You either play footy or you play basketball. It's the one thing where you can occupy dozens of kids with one ball, and that was our babysitter.
There's a long history and an amazing history in this country of the links between Aboriginal people and Australian rules football. Can you tell us a bit about those links and what footy means to Aboriginal people?
I mean, I can tell from my personal point of view, it was the first thing I ever did that was just fun and I was good at. And I got praised for it, and so I fell in love with it. Culturally, we had our own game, Marngrook, which merged with Gaelic football down in Melbourne and then became AFL. And then from a sociological point of view, for us, culturally, I mean, it was the first job we could get where we could get paid more than a white guy. And some of our greatest heroes were people like Polly Farmer, Doug Nichols, and just people that stood up and basically made a name for themselves through this sport, and we could idolise them. The Cracker Brothers, I'm sure I'm missing a few, but then you go to modern greats like Buddy Franklin and Andrew McLeod and Adam Goods. It was our avenue for equality. It didn't, we're still a fair way off, but it's the one thing that can't be taken off us.
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess there's this rhetoric about footy, lifting up Aboriginal people, and it's certainly, like you say, it's closer to a meritocracy than most of our society. And so Aboriginal
it used to be. Now it's about what private school you go to.
Yeah. But I wonder, like growing up in the Kimberley, where there's a lot of great footy players coming out of there, but also there's so much, poverty and social issues and things like that. Do you think footy, is it worth the hype of what it does for Aboriginal people?
Is it worth the hype? Absolutely. I mean, you imagine us without it. Yeah, no, it's absolutely worth the hype. If you're talking about the marketing and the commercial aspect to it, probably not so much, but there are so many kids that don't have a purpose or anything other than Saturday or Sunday. And for a lot of them, it's their only way out. It's their only real option. Ideally, that wouldn't be the case, but it is what it is. Ideally, I would prefer it if people in my community wanted to be doctors, and not lawyers, they're gross, but aspired to other careers, but also culturally, that's not really our thing. That's very much a colonial sort of mindset. You got to get a big career and earn all this money so you can have this big house on stolen land. But as far as what the game provides us, it's good for your soul, as long as you're enjoying it and getting something out of it. And yeah, I don't see any downside to it, especially in the community. That you can unite these communities with one oval. A hell of a lot more handy than a church.
It's becoming more of a religion, more of actual religion in Australia than most churches.
I can handle that, man. If you haven't watched the game at the G, then you haven't had a religious experience.
Now, there's also this history of racism and Aboriginal people having to stand up to racism as well. I mean, how does that feel like linked in with footy and Aboriginal people being so proud of it and so good at it that there's still this continuing incidents of high-profile racism?
I mean, it's just a reflection on society. You get to stand up against race. Like Adam Goods does it. And then it finally gets spoken about everywhere else. I'm pretty sure that wasn't the first time Adam got called an ape, just because it happened on a footy field. At least footy provides a platform for people to voice it. And, I had a very interesting experience arguing with people over it, that whole situation, saying, he's just being a sook, which is code for he's being a mouthy black so-and-so. No, it's just a direct reflection of our society, just condensed. And when you're told to just bounce the ball and mind, play your sport, shut up, stuff like that, it's all just code. It's all It's all just what actually happens in society. But at least when you're very, very good at a sport in an industry making billions of dollars, you can't be so easily ignored. Most of us, you can just step around us.
Yeah.
I am funny. I am actually funny, but Andy's asking me all these heavy questions, and I'm solving racism. So strap in. This is fun.
I didn't tell you that beforehand. No, I was like, come on, tell your jokes.
No, I absolutely cover that in my stand-up. I don't know. There are definitely jokes to be had, and there's a lot. The things are shifting and changing so often. I coached women's football for a long time back in WA, and that was an eye-opener. Just the sexual and social dynamics within that league. I learnt a lot. So, yeah, not all of it's funny, but you do find the funny.
Yeah, well, you just said it was the eye-opener, I guess, in another world of footy. I mean, you came from one marginalised community to see then footy in a totally different culture and way in women's footy. What insights did that give you?
It's emotional. I never had this paternal instinct until I started coaching women's football, and you become really protective, and it's hard to watch them get hurt. I mean, it's the same when you coach boys. There's this weird thing with their testicles block their ears, so they don't listen that well. But it was definitely one of the most rewarding things I ever got to experience, and I was in before the AFLW, so to see it grow to what it has is amazing. It's kind of crazy to think that even from a money point of view, these massive organizations just went, oh, well, we've been neglecting 50% of the population. We could totally cash in on this. And nothing but good is for it. And it's, again, opening up. A lot of Indigenous girls are realizing that it's not. There's a lot of gifted, talented people out there, and, some people like to express themselves physically.
All right, well, the Reclink Cup, you're playing on Sunday, and you've played before in other states as well. What do you like about the Reclink Cup?
Look, I'll just fess up now, is that the Reclink Cup it's an amazing event. I love what it does for the community, but also it's just kind of fun playing in a game that doesn't have any sort of physical stakes, so hopefully no one gets hurt, and we're just out there having fun, which is brilliant. But I'm not technically, I'm a ring-in. But I've been a horsey across the country, playing in Sydney, Perth, and now Brisbane. I'm really happy that everyone's been accepting of me, because I shouldn't technically be playing. But once you started, then you kind of get brought into the Reclink family, and it's all been very welcoming and brilliant. Met some amazing people, with the support from people that go and attend and raise money for this. It's just fun, and there's nothing like it. I don't know too many other industries or communities that could pull something like this together.
All right. Thanks very much, Quarters.
Okay, Andy.
See you at the game on Sunday.
Yeah. I know you won't.
You're listening to The Paradigm Shift on 4ZZZ, 102.1 FM. I was speaking to Craig Quartermaine about the long-lasting and very strong links between Aboriginal people and Australian rules football in this country. You can watch Quarters play against myself and a bunch of other 4ZZZ announcers this Sunday at the Reclink Community Cup at the Everton Park Wolves football ground. Now, a couple of Indigenous sports people that maybe will become more well-known in the very near future are Lydia Williams and Kaya Simon, who are both part of the Australian women's soccer team, aka the Matildas, who are currently causing quite a stir playing in the FIFA Women's World Cup, which is taking Australia and New Zealand by storm as we speak. And I think it's great to see women playing sport and women's sport getting some of the recognition that has traditionally just been reserved for men. So I thought it was worth delving more into this, to talk about what is the significance of this event and the exposure that's currently having for women and young girls in Australia. So I spoke to Abbey Boyer, who is an academic at the University of Melbourne and also is a keen follower of the Women's World Cup.
I'm Abbey Boyer. I'm lecturer in sport and physical education at the University of Melbourne.
And as I understand it, Abbey, you are following keenly the Women's World Cup that is currently happening in Australia and New Zealand.
That's right. I'm so excited about this. I think it's a real moment in time for the history of Australian sport and women in sport in particular.
So the Women's World Cup is certainly gathered an incredible amount of media interest, and the crowd attendance records are falling all over the place. This is certainly a kind of unprecedented thing in Australia for women's sport and potentially around the globe as well.
Yes, I think it's a real moment in time, and we will look back on this as a very iconic period for women in sport, in particular for Australia, but just for Australian sport and soccer in general. We are so well placed to perform really, really well, and the spotlight on the world stage and the fact that we're breaking all these attendance records, I think that this will follow on to have a great impact for the future of Australian sport and for children in sport.
Yeah, I guess that's the question. Obviously, it's great for the women, the select bunch of elite athletes who are in the Australian Matildas team and the other World Cup teams. But I mean, for the average woman or girl in Australia, what kind of positive effects do you see coming from this?
I think the amazing and quite unique thing about this team is that we have incredibly high profile players, so playing in the English Premier League, for example, for Arsenal and Chelsea, and they come from such diverse backgrounds. So it might be that we've got a couple of Indigenous players, and Caitlin Ford, for example, one of the key forwards, I think this is her third or fourth World Cup. She's grown up with Sam Kerr, and she tells the story of how her single mum couldn't actually afford to get her to tournaments. And so the community, she sold chocolates, and the bus driver would buy her boxes of chocolates for her to be able to afford to get to tournaments and trainings. Those kind of stories speak to children because they can relate to that, and it tells them, actually, I can be that. You don't have to be in a special position to be able to get there. Anyone can reach the pinnacle. And I think that message is incredibly powerful.
I mean, there's lots of other interests that young girls or young people in Australia might have that encourage them to participate and chase their dreams and things like that. Are there particular things about sport that you see as helpful for the development of individuals or communities?
We know that for girls, so soccer in its ranking for participation in girls' sport is about fifth, and for boys it's second. And the more predominant modes of physical activity for girls are dancing and gymnastics and netball. What we do know is that there's an improvement in mental health, not just for this moment in time, but as they grow up to be adults, that has a lasting effect. It also has an effect on their possibility for engagement in sport as they're adults. So it does have whatever affects them now and improves and increases their participation, that will have ripple effects for their life in the future and ultimately for the well-being of the community, which is what we all want, to be able to engage productively with our community in a really healthy and positive way. When you engage in sport, you release those endorphins, but you're also making connections with other members of the community. You're developing resiliency, developing the ability to build relationships, to have a level of accountability, especially in a team sport like soccer. So all of those peripheral outcomes, for a lot of parents, they might put their children into sport, yes, in part to develop those skills and that basic ability, but a big part of the reason that people put their children into sport is to develop those interpersonal skills and resiliency and a positive attitude towards physical activity. So those elements are just as important, and it's definitely not a standalone. It's definitely an interconnected part of what you bring into your life skills and your skill set, moving into the workforce, moving into further study, things like that.
Now, there are some negative traits about sport and the role it plays in our culture. There's a kind of tribalism around clubs or nations, and certainly within sporting competitions there's a kind of competitiveness that can be pretty ruthless, and when you look at elite sport there's some horrendous behaviour, and really it's shocking the way some of these people are overpaid. And a lot of these things are things that people might attribute to the patriarchy. I mean, is there a worry about like women's sport just kind of furthering these values and these kind of traits in our society, or do you think that getting women involved changes some of these things?
I think getting women involved, and not just women, but peripheral groups that haven't always been at the forefront of sport. So when we get more funding for sport, then we're able to open up those avenues of greater opportunity and greater access to other community groups. For example, you might see free programs being run for girls, free programs or cheaper programs being accessible for mums to be involved, for culturally and linguistically diverse populations, for the integration, for example, of disability and integration into the Olympics in sport, and they're running those at the same time. The more that we open up these avenues, people will opt in. The more people that opt in, the more funding that attracts, and then it broadens the scope. So when you talk about the patriarchy, that's quite narrow. So if we can broaden that, if we can open that access, then that can only be a positive thing for the broader community and our society in general.
All right, well, the World Cup is on. Do you have any tips or things that people should watch out for, or ways to get the most out of the Women's World Cup being on?
Look, we're lucky enough in our household, because I have two young children, that we were able to watch the amazing Matildas documentary on Disney. And so as a consequence, the walls in my house are papered with homemade profiles of all the players. So Katrina Gorry, Caitlin Ford. We're seeing more than just fans of Sam Kerr. Ali Carpenter is a real gun in the team. So looking at all the social media avenues and learning about the players, I think that really helps to build the momentum and the engagement in this World Cup. So we're so excited we're going to the game. Absolutely can't wait to see how far they can get.
Okay, thanks very much, Abby.
Thank you. Thanks, Andy.
We were talking with Abbey Boyer about the Women's World Cup and what this footballing extravaganza means for the women and girls of Australia. Now, so far, it's all been very positive about sport, hasn't it? This paradigm shift, but there's a bit of a cognitive dissonance, I guess, because as much as I love sport, and I've offended many artists by saying this over the years, but I believe ultimately that sport is just another art form as valid as any other, and it has lots of positive benefits. But sometimes it does seem that there's something a bit out of balance with how much money and media attention and adulation is given to sport, at the expense of maybe other areas where it could go. And so the last interview, I'm going to talk to Andy George, who tried to point this out a year or so ago and by disrupting an NRL game, and he was tackled by security, booed by the crowd, kicked out of the game, and later sent to prison for his efforts. He was later released on appeal, but I thought it'd be good to talk to him about, I guess, trying to infiltrate the spectacle of sport to get other messages across.
Hey, I'm Andrew. I currently live in Lismore, and I've had a few years of civil resistance activities across Australia and organising under my belt.
And today on Paradigm Shift, we're talking about sport. And you've got an interesting connection to sport because you're one of not that many people who has actually been sent to prison for disrupting a football game. Can you tell us a bit about this story?
So I guess the story begins when I saw in England the Just Stop Oil protester Lewis cable tie himself to the goalposts of a Premier League football game. And I just loved this little video that they released where he was like in the crowd. The game was taking place in the background, and he was like, I don't want to be doing this. I'm shitting myself. And then he goes down and does it. And the video is like really amazing. And the disruption is so brief, but it just was so intense and like epic. I was impressed. And then I was part of Fireproof Australia, which was a campaign in Sydney about getting disaster survivors rehomed and getting us a sovereign aerial firefighting fleet in early 2022. And we had been blocking roads weekly for about 6 weeks and stuff, and getting a lot of detention. And I just really wanted to disrupt a football game. I just felt that this attention, our culture, our society is in a state of sleepwalking amidst a breakdown of everything that we love and care for. And I don't think that sport should be spared in getting disrupted and forcing people to look at what's going on. And I just thought, well, there's a whole bunch of cameras there. It sort of should be kind of easy to be on the TV and all the rest. So inspired by Lewis in the UK, I just went to this rugby game with one other person, and a little extra spice, which I didn't think about too much, was I had a smoke flare. And after a nervous period, I ran onto the pitch in the middle of the sort of something or other happening when the cameras were all focused in the middle where all the players were. I ran sort of straight into them, lit the smoke flare, soon after got tackled by security, and spent 17 days. The next 17 days were incarcerated as a result, but I was glad to get out on the other side. I think it was worth it in some ways.
Yeah, you got out on appeal in the end, which rightly so. I think the punishment did not fit the crime, but it was interesting, the fact that you got sent to prison for just something so minor, disrupting a football game. But it's like, it really brought out how seriously our society takes football. It's this kind of religion, and it can't be disrupted by somebody making a political statement like it. I think there was something kind of clarity in even the shock of your sentence.
Yeah, like I was definitely not really expecting that. But, it helped to highlight the ridiculousness and the injustice of our world. A little bit of a backfiring effect in terms of like how much attention that got because of that overreaction. But I think just to put it into context, like I had been arrested about 4 or 5 times in the previous 6 weeks, just blocking roads. And then the New South Wales government changed the law to make that a prisonable offence in sort of direct response to us and Blockade Australia. And so the magistrate was referring to the Attorney General's changing of the law when he sentenced me. He was like, you didn't block a road, but you might as well have, more or less. You're a menace. We're going to lock you away. But I'm not fully sure if it's to do with the football itself. I think it is, that was taken into account the previous weeks.
Yeah, there is something interesting about football, though, politically, isn't it? And it's notable that you disrupted the Cronulla Sharks, right, which was ScoMo's favourite team. And there's this way that politicians kind of use sport to be like, see, we're just ordinary people. We just love sport like everyone, no matter what their policies are and how destructive their policies are. Like the way sport is kind of used really cynically politically. And it was notable that you disrupted ScoMo's team.
I'm glad. Yeah, that felt like a good part to it as well. Yeah, but there was another disruption of a sporting game in WA. Disrupt by a pub protester ran across a AFL game there. And over there, Woodside Petroleum is the sponsor of these football teams and all the rest. So, and he didn't get much of a penalty, which is good.
Yeah, there is quite a tradition of disrupting sport games, actually politically. Most famously, there was big protests against South African rugby teams in like the 70s and 80s, but even going back to English suffragettes running across the horse race and things like that. Were you aware of that political tradition when you did it?
I guess I was aware, but not necessarily like thinking about it too much. Like it was informed, I guess, by the more recent stuff, as I mentioned, Just Stop Oil. But it certainly makes a lot of sense, I think. And just from my perspective in terms of our society and the danger that we're all in and the complicity and apathy and all the rest, like we need to get everyone, as uncomfortable as it is, to focus on what's going on. And yeah, sport is a good place to do it. And I'm hoping that there will be more, in the future. Getting sent to prison was ridiculous, but like that won't happen, I'd say, to most people. But I think we could just create a culture where it's like, oh, there they are again. messages. There's so many messages that need to be heard, you know? And yeah, as you said, like sport used politically as this everyday, I'm a good politician, I watch the footy and this and that stuff. It's like, yeah, a bit weird.
All right, thanks very much, Andy. You have brought a bit of different perspective to a show that my other interviews are mostly fairly positive things about sport and community. But it is, yeah, it's good to remember, I guess, that the precedence given to sport is sometimes a bit ridiculous.
Yeah, and like just on that note, there is this like sort of climate change group within like the AFL professional sports community, and like these are people who we all know have like massive reach, right? Like massive reach. So many people are watching them and are interested in them. Like what a responsibility they have. And this climate group, I'm so disappointed in what they're doing. They are literally like, you go to their website and it's like, okay, we've put some solar panels on the Fitzroy Football Club in Melbourne. And they got like a fancy video that would have cost tens of $1,000s to show it. And I just like, what is going on? Like, you're on the same planet. You have such an opportunity. And I know that sports stars are speaking out about other things. And I guess racism is one of them that's really prevalent in the AFL. And there's changes happening there perhaps. And it is a political thing that is acted upon. But the fact that like the death of our entire planet isn't something that these sports stars are like courageously speaking out on or advocating for, it needs to change. And I think we can make that change happen by disrupting them and creating dialogue through our courageous actions.
All right. Thanks very much, Andy, for chatting with us.
Thanks, Andy.
That is Andy George there talking about his own experience taking part in elite sport by the method of running on the field and disrupting an NRL game. And it is a protest action with a great tradition that goes back a long way. As we said, I've a few times been a part of it myself, and when the Cricket World Cup was in Australia a few years back, I actually was down in Melbourne. I painted a cape for my friend to wear as he ran on the field disrupting the game. It said, "Shut down Manus Island, free the refugees." And you know what? Manus Island is shut, and most of those refugees have been settled after being told that they never would. And I'm not saying it was down to that, but these kind of things, just consistently putting messages out there, putting it into the consciousness, is how protest works. And so I certainly think it's very valid disrupting sporting games. The most recent one we've seen, I think, was at Wimbledon a couple of weeks ago with some Just Stop Oil protesters disrupting the very prim and proper surroundings of Wimbledon. And as always, they were booed and harangued in the media and things like that. But you know what? The climate crisis is more important than the tennis. And sometimes we just need a bit of reminding of that, because when it comes to the finances and media focus and things like that allotted to it, you'd be mistaken for thinking it was the other way around. And we have seen that playing out in the news in the last couple of weeks, actually, with the state of Victoria saying they won't host the Commonwealth Games because they can't justify spending so much of the public's money on this elite sporting event. And I think with Brisbane down to host the Olympic Games in a decade's time, those are conversations that we should be having as well, too, of how much of our public money do we want to sink into this thing, you know, compared to other things that it could be going to. And so that's certainly a worthwhile discussion, particularly in these times of climate crisis, cost of living concerns. Yes, so disrupting sport, it's good on him, but also watching sport, participating in it, I think it's all great, and I do encourage you to fully enjoy the Women's World Cup that's on at the moment, as well as the other elite sport, the footy and the Ashes and whatever, to enjoy people using their skills that they've been honing over the years and working as a team creatively to get a result. I think, and of course, playing sport as well brings out so many good things, as we've heard from our other interviews today. And one sporting game that I will plug is the Reclink Community Cup, which is happening this Sunday. Maybe I'll see you there. If not, I'll see you next Friday, same time on your radio. Hope you've enjoyed the Paradigm Shift's little venture into the back page realms of the sporting world, and I'll see you next week.